When she entered the mansion, he almost couldn't believe it. The new nanny, in simple clothes and with a weary look, was his ex-wife. The millionaire remained silent, staring at the past that now pleaded for forgiveness before him. If you enjoy emotional dramas, subscribe to the channel and comment now where you are listening from. Continuing. The morning sun streamed through the wide windows of the mansion in Bel Air, Los Angeles, creating golden reflections on the marble of the entrance hall. Rafael Mendoza descended the stairs with firm steps, adjusting the cuff of his Italian shirt while checking messages on his phone. At 42, he had built a real estate empire that stretched across the country. But his routine was as precise as the numbers on his financial spreadsheets. Coffee at 6:30, team meeting at 8, business lunch at noon. There was no room for improvisation in the life of a man who controlled billions. The house reflected his personality, modern, impeccable, and silent. 16 rooms distributed over 3 stories, a pool that seemed to merge with the city's skyline, gardens designed by renowned landscape architects, everything perfect, everything under control, except for the screams coming from upstairs. "Daddy, Sophia is crying again." Michael's voice, his 10-year-old son, echoed through the hallway. "And the nanny said she can't stay anymore." Raphael sighed, closing his eyes for a moment. It was the 5th nanny in 6 months. Ever since Carmen, the housekeeper who had cared for the children for years, retired, no employee could handle Sophia. At 7 years old, his youngest daughter had become increasingly difficult, rejecting anyone who tried to replace the maternal figure she had lost so early in her life. He climbed the stairs 2 steps at a time, finding the scene he knew well. Sophia clinging to her teddy bear, tears streaming down her reddened face, while the nanny packed her bags with an exasperated expression. "Mr. Mendoza, I'm very sorry, but I cannot continue. The girl doesn't obey me, screams when I try to bathe her, and refuses to eat anything I prepare." The middle-aged woman shook her head in frustration. "Oh, she needs professional help." Raphael felt his jaw clench. After the nanny left, he knelt beside his daughter, trying to find the right words. Sophia looked at him with those large brown eyes, so much like, "Daddy, why do the nannies always leave?" The innocent question pierced his chest like a sharp blade. "We'll find someone special to take care of you, my princess. I promise." The following Monday, Margaret Silver adjusted her simple blouse and checked the address on the crumpled paper for the 5th time. The domestic employment agency had been clear: a traditional high-end family, 2 children, generous salary. At 38, she could not afford to refuse work, especially after the difficult last few months. The bus dropped her off at the nearest stop in Bel Air, and she walked through the tree-lined streets, observing the mansions that seemed like distant worlds from her current reality. This was not how she had imagined her life 10 years ago, when she lived in a similar house, when her biggest problem was choosing which dress to wear for charity dinners. The electronic gate opened after she announced her name on the intercom. She walked down the cobblestone driveway, admiring the impeccably maintained gardens. The house was impressive, but there was something familiar in the architecture that bothered her. Sebastian, the butler, greeted her at the entrance with his usual professional courtesy. "You must be Margaret. Mr. Raphael is waiting for you in the office." The name hit her ears like distant thunder. Raphael it couldn't be. Los Angeles had millions of inhabitants, dozens of Raphaels. It was a coincidence. It had to be. But when Sebastian opened the office door, and she saw the man with his back turned to us, examining papers by the window, her heart practically stopped. Even from behind, she would recognize that upright posture. The way he ran his hand through his hair when he was concentrating. Raphael turned, and for an infinite moment, time stopped. The papers slipped from his hands, falling to the floor like autumn leaves. His eyes widened, his breath caught in his throat. There, standing at the entrance to his office, was the only woman who had managed to break through all his defenses. Margaret. The name came out as a hoarse whisper. "Raphael." She kept her voice steady, despite the earthquake she felt inside. They looked at each other in silence, measuring each other, searching for signs of the people they once were. She was thinner, her hair shorter, but there was still that natural dignity in her bearing. He looked more serious, lines of expression marking his face, his eyes less warm than she remembered. "You can't stay here." The words came out before he could fully process them. "I need this job, Raphael." Margaret raised her chin, that stubborn gesture he knew so well. "I didn't know the position was at your house." "Daddy!" Sophia's shrill voice interrupted the tense moment. The girl came running to the door, stopping abruptly when she saw the unknown woman. "Who is she?" Margaret looked at the little girl and felt her chest tighten. Sophia was a miniature version of herself as a child, curly brown hair, large, curious eyes. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine. "Hi, sweetie. I'm Margaret. I came to meet you and your brother." Sophia approached slowly, studying the woman's face with childlike attention. "You have a beautiful smile. Are you going to take care of us?" Margaret looked at Raphael, seeing the conflict etched on his face. He wanted to refuse, to send away the woman who represented a past he preferred to forget, but the hope in his daughter's eyes stopped him. "Please, Daddy. She seems nice." Sophia confidently grabbed Margaret's hand. "And she smells like flowers, just like Mommy before she left." The innocent comment hit Raphael like a punch to the gut. Sophia barely remembered her biological mother, who had died when she was only 2 years old. But there was something in Margaret that had sparked an immediate connection in the child. Michael appeared shortly after, more reserved than his sister, but equally curious. At 10, he was a young version of his father. Serious, he was observant, protecting his emotions behind a mask of premature maturity. "Margaret will be with us for a while. Children." Raphael made the decision against all his instincts. "Now go play while we discuss the details." After the children left, silence settled between them again, heavy like a brewing storm. "Why?" Raphael's question was laden with years of resentment. "Why did you take this job?" "Because I need to support my daughter." The answer came without hesitation. "Your daughter?" The world seemed to spin beneath Raphael's feet. "Helena. She's 8 years old." Margaret kept her voice neutral, but Raphael sensed the fierce protectiveness she felt for the child. He sank into the armchair, processing the information. Margaret had a daughter. Of course she did. 10 years was enough time to build a new life, to find someone who valued her as he hadn't known how to. "Where is her father?" "That's none of your business, Raphael." The coldness in her voice made him recoil. Over the next few days, the house began to change in a way Raphael didn't know whether he approved of or feared. Margaret brought a different energy to those rooms that for years had only breathed efficiency. Sophia stopped throwing tantrums at bath time. Michael started smiling more, and for the first time in months, Raphael heard laughter coming from upstairs. Margaret worked with the same natural grace she demonstrated in everything. She transformed simple meals into special moments, invented games that kept the children entertained, and managed to set boundaries without needing to yell. She had learned to be a mother the hardest way, alone. One afternoon, Raphael came home early and found Margaret at the living room piano, playing a soft melody while Sophia hummed beside her. The scene transported him to a different time, when they dreamed together of a family, when they believed that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. "Shall you still play?" The remark came out more intimately than he intended. Margaret stopped abruptly, as if caught doing something forbidden. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have touched the piano without permission. You can play whenever you want." He approached, noticing how she tensed at his presence. "The children like music. Sophia has natural talent. With some lessons, she could—" "No." The answer was drier than he intended. "I don't want her to get too attached to things that can disappear." The comment was directed at the piano, but both knew it referred to much more. Margaret closed the instrument's lid and stood up, creating distance between them. "Of course. It won't happen again." That night, Raphael lay awake thinking about the woman sleeping in the maid's room on the ground floor. 10 years had passed since she had simply disappeared from his life. Taking with her divorce papers, he never fully understood. One week they were planning to expand their businesses together. The next, she was demanding half his assets and claiming irreconcilable differences. He never knew what truly happened. One day he woke up and discovered that the woman he loved had become a cold and calculating stranger, only interested in money. Or at least, that's how it seemed at the time. Now, watching how she cared for his children with such affection, how she gave up any comfort to dedicate herself to the children, Raphael began to question his own version of events. Was there something he didn't know? Something she had never told him? Downstairs, Margaret was also awake, staring at the ceiling of the small room she now called home. Working in that house was harder than she had imagined. Every corner awakened memories of when she was happy, when she believed he would love her forever. She had sacrificed everything to protect him, agreeing to be seen as self-serving and ambitious so that he would never discover the betrayal of Victor, his former partner and best friend. The evidence of corruption that Victor had planted to incriminate Raphael would only disappear if she took the blame and walked away forever. It was the price she paid for love, saving the man she loved by destroying her own reputation. Now, seeing how cold and distrustful he had become, she questioned if it had been worth it. But when she looked at Sophia and Michael, when she saw their need for affection and stability, she knew she would stay, at least until they no longer needed her. What she didn't know was that the past was about to knock on the door again, and this time there would be no way to protect Raphael from the consequences. 3 weeks later, Raphael was in his office when Sebastian announced an unexpected visit. Victor Albright crossed the door with that smile that always disguised his true intentions, his perfectly coiffed grey hair and a suit that cost more than many people's annual salary. "Raphael, my friend, how are you?" Victor approached with open arms, as if the last 10 years of silence had never existed. "Victor." Raphael did not get up from his chair, maintaining his distance. "Guys, what do you want?" "Always straight to the point," Victor laughed, sitting down uninvited. "I heard Margaret is back in your life. How interesting." The mention of her name made Raphael tense every muscle. "How did you know?" "Los Angeles is smaller than it seems for people in our social circle." Victor crossed his legs, too comfortable for someone who wasn't welcome. "I must admit I was surprised. I thought you had learned your lesson about self-serving women. Get out of my house." "Calm down, Raphael. I came here as a friend." Victor took an envelope from his jacket. "In fact, I came to warn you about some documents that have recently surfaced, papers that could be problematic for your reputation." Raphael took the envelope, feeling his blood run cold as he read. They were inflated construction contracts, rigged bids, bribes disguised as donations. His forged signature was on all of them. "This is a lie." "Of course it is," Victor smiled. "But do you think the district attorney's office will care about that? Or the press? Imagine the headlines. Real estate tycoon involved in corruption scheme. Your children will have to carry that burden forever. What do you want? Just a conversation with Margaret." Victor stood up, smoothing his jacket. "It seems she has some documents that could clarify certain inconsistencies from the past. It would be a shame if they fell into the wrong hands." After Victor left, Raphael remained alone in the office, the envelope in his hands trembling. He knew his former partner was capable of anything, but he had never imagined that the past would come back to haunt him this way. Margaret was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Raphael found her. Sophia was sitting on the counter, helping peel carrots and talking about her day at school. The domestic scene was so natural that for a moment he forgot the reason for the visit. "Sophia, honey, can you go play for a bit? I need to talk to Margaret." The girl ran off and silence settled between them. Margaret continued cutting vegetables, but Raphael sensed the tension in her shoulders. Victor was here today. The knife stopped mid-motion. Margaret closed her eyes, taking a deep breath before turning to face him. "What did he want?" "Documents you supposedly have." Raphael approached. "Margaret, what really happened 10 years ago? Why did you file for divorce?" For a long moment, she just looked at him, as if deciding whether to finally tell the truth. Then, as if a dam had broken, the words began to pour out. "Victor came to see me a week before I filed for divorce. He had false evidence that you were involved in corruption, documents he himself had forged." Margaret leaned against the counter, as if needing support. "He said that if I didn't distance myself from you and didn't take some of the blame, he would send everything to the federal police." Raphael felt the world spin. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I loved you." Tears began to stream down her face. because you had worked your whole life to build what you had, and I couldn't let him destroy everything. So I accepted being the villain of the story." "My God, Margaret." Raphael approached, but she recoiled. "He said if I said anything, you would be arrested, that your businesses would go bankrupt, that you would lose everything." She wiped away her tears with the back of her hand. "I preferred for you to hate me than to see your life destroyed." "And Helena?" The question came out as a whisper. Margaret looked at him with an expression that mixed pain and resignation. "Helena is your daughter, Raphael." The silence that followed was deafening. Raphael leaned against the wall, trying to process the information. He had another daughter, a daughter he never knew, who grew up without a father because her mother had sacrificed her own happiness to protect him. "Why did you never tell me?" "Because when I found out I was pregnant, we were already divorced. You had remarried and seemed happy." Margaret wiped her hands on her apron. "I thought it would be better to leave things as they were. You didn't have that right." "I know." The admission came laden with years of guilt. "But look at Sophia and Michael. They lost their mother so early, and you shut yourself off so much after that. I didn't want Helena to grow up feeling like a burden." Raphael ran his hands through his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. In a few hours, his reality had completely transformed. The woman he thought had been self-serving had sacrificed everything for him. He had a daughter he never knew, and Victor, the man he had considered a friend, was behind all the destruction. "Where is she now?" "With my mother in Pasadena. I see her on weekends." Margaret hesitated. She asks about her father sometimes." Before Raphael could answer, Sophia appeared in the kitchen, followed by Michael. "Why are you sad?" Sophia's innocent question broke the tense moment. "We're not sad, Princess." Raphael knelt down to her height. "Actually, we have a surprise to tell you." In the following days, Raphael delved into a thorough investigation of Victor. He hired the best lawyers, private investigators, and began to gather evidence of the manipulation that had destroyed his first marriage. Margaret helped him, providing documents she had kept all those years as an insurance policy. Working together brought back an intimacy they both thought they had lost forever. They spent hours in the office, analyzing papers, making calls, reconstructing the puzzle of the past. And slowly, they began to rediscover each other. Raphael saw that Margaret had become an even stronger woman, shaped by difficulties, but not hardened by them. She maintained the same gentleness that had enchanted him years ago, but now there was a depth in her eyes that spoke of battles fought and won. Margaret, in turn, discovered that beneath the mask of a cold businessman, Raphael was still the man she had loved. Fatherhood had humanized him, and loss had taught him to value what truly mattered. The final confrontation with Victor happened in his office, with lawyers from both sides present. Raphael had gathered enough evidence to prove the forgery of documents and the blackmail. Victor, cornered, tried to negotiate, but it was too late. "You destroyed my family, Victor. My daughter grew up without a father because of your lies." "You were always too naive, Raphael." Victor maintained his arrogance to the end. "Margaret is an opportunist. You'll see that when she tries to take half your assets again. The only opportunist here is you." Raphael stood up. "And you will pay for every lie you told." When the federal police took Victor away in handcuffs, Raphael felt as if a 10-year weight had finally lifted from his shoulders. But the real healing began the following weekend, when Margaret brought Helena to meet him. The 8-year-old girl had his eyes and her mother's smile. She was shy at first, but soon filled with curiosity about this father who had appeared in her life. Sophia and Michael welcomed her with enthusiasm, happy to discover they had a sister. "She looks like you when she smiles." Margaret watched Raphael interact with Helena in the garden, "and she has your stubbornness." He laughed when Helena insisted on showing how she could do a cartwheel on the lawn. "Margaret, You don't need to say anything," she interrupted softly. "I know we can't just go back in time and pretend nothing happened, but we can build something new." Raphael held her hand. "If you want to. If you think we can." Margaret looked at the 3 children playing together, then at the man beside her. There were scars between them that might never fully heal, but there was also enough love to try again. "I'd like to try." 6 months later, the house in Bel Air was unrecognizable, not physically. Raphael had learned that a home is not built with expensive furniture or impeccable decor. The difference was in the sounds, laughter echoing through the hallways, music coming from the living room piano, lively conversations at dinner. Margaret had left the maid's room and moved upstairs, not as his wife yet. They were rebuilding trust step by step, but as the woman he wanted by his side for the rest of his life. Helena adapted to the new reality with the ease of children, dividing her time between her grandmother's house in Pasadena and the mansion in Los Angeles. Sophia treated her like the sister she always wanted, and Michael, after the initial shock, embraced the role of protective older brother. Raphael had changed too. He was still successful in business, but now he knew how to separate work from family. He came home in time for dinner, attended school meetings, and for the first time in years, took real vacations. One night, after putting the children to bed, Raphael found Margaret at the piano, playing the same melody from that afternoon months ago. This time, he sat beside her on the bench, covering her hands with his on the keyboard. "I love you." The words came out naturally, without the weight of the past or fear of the future. "I love you too." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Always have." They married in a simple ceremony, with only the children and closest friends. Margaret wore a light blue dress that Helena had chosen, and Raphael smiled more that day than he had in 10 years. During the exchange of vows, he pledged not only to love and respect her, but to protect her from the storms he himself might cause. She promised never again to carry burdens alone, to share with him both joys and worries. Life did not become perfect. No life is. There were still discussions about the children's upbringing, moments of financial stress when Raphael decided to be more selective with projects, and the constant adaptation of a rebuilt family. But there was something solid at the foundation of everything now. The certainty that, regardless of the challenges that came, they would face them together. Raphael had learned that true power came not from controlling everything around him, but from trusting enough to share control. Margaret discovered that love did not demand silent sacrifice, but honest communication and courage to fight for what you want. And the children, they simply flourished in a home where love was demonstrated not only in words, but in presence, patience, and fulfilled promises. One Sunday afternoon, almost a year after their reunion, Raphael watched his family in the garden. Helena taught Sophia how to braid hair, Michael read a book lying on the grass, and Margaret watered the flowers she had planted. He thought of all the winding paths that had led them there, the right and wrong decisions, the lost years, and the rediscovered opportunities. Perhaps life wasn't about avoiding the storms, but about learning to dance in the rain. Margaret approached, sitting beside him on the garden bench. "What are you thinking about?" "How lucky we are." Raphael kissed her forehead. "How love can be stronger than pride. And how it's never too late to start over." She intertwined her fingers with his. As the sun set over Los Angeles, dyeing the sky golden and pink, the Mendoza family knew they had found their place in the world. It wasn't the story they had imagined when they were young, but it was the story they chose to write together, and that made all the difference.